What is up, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome to the Vanguard Project podcast. My name is Austin Jardine, and a happy freaking Monday to you all. I hope you all had a wonderful weekend, enjoyed your Father's Day, and for some of you, maybe a long weekend as well. Before we get into it, though, if you don't mind doing me a huge favor, leave a rating, a review, subscribe to the show, follow me on the Instagrams. It means the absolute world to me to continue growing the show, and gives me the warm and fuzzies knowing that you guys like what we're putting out there into the world. But before we get started, for those of you maybe new to the show, joining for the first time, maybe forgotten, my mantra here, my cute little tagline is growth through story and strength through community. And what I mean by that is I sit down with folks and I have them share their life stories with me, hopefully in a way that gives you some insight, something to chew on, maybe something to motivate you or inspire you or help you through a tough time, or maybe find some direction, whatever the case may be. So we talk about a variety of different things, and today talking with Danique about her life story, and then Leashes of Valor, and maybe some ways that either they can help you or you can help them as well. So that's kind of what I do. I do my best to really let the interviewees share their story, not so much focusing on myself or a random topic necessarily, so much as really a directed conversation about what somebody's doing and how they got to where they're at. So really, that's my hope, is to provide you, maybe some community or something to tap into to help push you forward or get you involved. So with all of that being said, that's my goal. That's what I like to do. Be sure to subscribe to stay up to date. Go to the website, vanguardstories.com. Hit me up on the Instagrams. I'd love to connect with you all. But I have also been extremely fortunate over the years in a variety of ways. I've been doing this podcast for a little over a year now, but to have partnered with several companies to kind of help push me forward and get connected even further. And one of them is actually Black Rifle Coffee, of which I love. I love caffeine. It's terrible. I think I used to be a full pot a day person by myself. Now I think I'm sitting right around 3 or 4, which might still equate to a full pot, just not all at once. So I don't really know. Either way, I'm a big fan of Black Rifle's website, their website too. But what I'm going to say is, if you use code Vanguard on their website, you actually get 20% off, including their grinds coffee packets and merch. I actually was in the market this weekend for some new gym shirts. All of mine are pretty beat to hell at this point. So I ordered a gym shirt and then the coffee grinds. They're the little grinds packets because I like to have those while I'm at the gym. I don't know why. I like the flavor of them. But these are the first times that I'm trying the Black Rifle grinds packs. And I'm super excited. My code worked on them. So be sure to go pick up either a subscription, some coffee, some merch, whatever. It works on most things. Use code Vanguard. Get you 20% off, which is nuts. And considering most of us are going to be out in the world now. I mean, now that it's summertime, it's time to get outside. You don't want to forget your caffeine. Might as well get a subscription, for instance. Save 20%. But be sure to use code Vanguard on Black Rifle's website. And I think as far as announcements and sponsors, that's where I'm at today. I hope you all have a wonderful day. And we're going to roll an awesome episode with Danique. And I will catch you next time. What is up, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome to the Vanguard Project. My name is Austin Jardine, and I'm excited because I'm on the phone with Danique, and we're going to talk about Leashes of Valor and kind of the life that you've lived, Danique. And I'm hoping that I can keep my energy up, because we were just talking that we both struggled through. We're recording Wednesday, and I just ate dinner, because we're recording a little bit later. So I'm riding the chicken high right now. We're going to see how long this lasts, but I'm excited. So if you don't mind, maybe before I steal an intro, do you mind just sharing a little bit about you, what you're up to, and then I will take notes and ask some questions.
Super stoked to be on with you and talk to you. So I'm Danique. I'm one of the co-founders and president of Leashes of Valor. We're a veteran-founded and run nonprofit that provides service dogs to veterans free of charge. We're about 5 years old as an organization. And before that, all of us served in different capacities in the military. So my service dates back to '02, inspired by 9/11. And I left the service in 2007. And then fucked my way around transition. That's the kindest way of putting it. Had a mini midlife crisis, I was law enforcement in the military and specifically always wanted to do canine, left the military, actually ended up in cosmetology school. Um,
Okay,
and then
that's a
ended
big
up
turn.
yes, it gets even better. Then ended up an unemployed military spouse hairdresser in Syracuse, who went to the Veterans Administration, trying to use my GI Bill to just, find a job, find something. And yeah, so I went to Syracuse University, and that's really where I stumbled into service dogs, through another veteran in a veterans organization. And through that, academically, in a brief synopsis, ended up in veterans policy, specifically service dogs. And then from there, I've always worked in the service dog industry, ultimately culminating in founding my own organization. So that's how we get to present day. Wow. And I'm going to pause and let you peel that onion.
Yeah. Okay. So if you could see, my note-taking style is I'm jotting down things with arrows so that I can remember where I'm trying to go, because holy shit, that's a lot. So let's start 2001 and 2002. Yep. You said that you were inspired, more or less, inspired's probably a crass word, right, to join because of 9/11. Did you come from a military family? Were you like, hey, this is something I need to do, or what was the inspiration there?
I mean, just to go down the first rabbit hole, I was raised in Germany, so I was dual citizen. So I'm not full-blooded 100% American. So I was raised in Germany until I was 18 years old, came to the States, and then was, a girl going to college in Florida, in Tampa, and then 9/11 happened. So basically my whole world was turned upside down. I had no actual relationship with like veterans, the military, even national defense, like terrorism, like all that was so far from my day-to-day life or concerns, if that makes sense. Like sure. It was just a very eye-opening adulting moment, aside from the actual impact of what you're witnessing. And I lived right by Tampa, where President Bush was that day. So it was somewhat law enforcement impactful locally. And that turned it around for me, where I wanted law enforcement, and the local law enforcement agency wouldn't take me because I smoked pot in Germany and I had a whole bunch of records in German that nobody wanted to translate. So it was a difficult journey to get into the local police academy, which ultimately led me to the recruiter's office, because I had such a desire to serve in uniform, that if the local agencies wouldn't take me, maybe the military would. And my American father had served in the Navy during Vietnam. So I ended up at the Navy recruiter's office, and they were able to promise me law enforcement in my contract. And that's how I ended up really committing to the Navy, because I really wanted to be police more than in the military, if that makes sense.
Sure. So maybe another couple questions around that, right? So one, and this one might be a little weird, but like the smoking weed stuff, like I feel like that's a common thing now, right? And I understand that law enforcement makes it difficult if you smoke weed, right? Knowing that I don't really know if there's any long-term harm effects of it, right? But I guess, how did you kind of navigate that as far as working with local law enforcement and then kind of transitioning that to military? And I ask in kind of like a weird way, so that if somebody is maybe in your same shoes, how did you navigate that to offer as advice, if that question makes sense? I was formulating as I was talking.
Totally makes sense. And realistically, it was actually a really hard lesson on integrity for me, because I thought I was doing the right thing, disclosing that many eons ago. At this point, it had been 6 years since I'd smoked pot, and I was employed somewhere that did drug testing. So I was able to prove drug-free employment and everything. But the fact that I disclosed something honestly, and then for that disclosure was penalized to the point that I didn't get the job. And then the military recruiter literally tells me, lie, 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 deny, 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 make counter accusations. You know what I mean?
Yep.
He's like, just don't mention it. So that was my first lesson on almost like what I want to say is society's morals dictated by doctrine. Like they're saying weed is bad, and because you smoke weed, policy says we can't hire you, even though I'd been smoke-free for 6 years. Like there was no human factor. There was no in-between bureaucracy. And the fact that I was literally punished for being honest was a really shitty, weird lesson to learn.
Yeah, that's interesting. So I have sort of a similar experience, I guess you could say. So like, and it's kind of fun to draw this parallel a little bit because I sympathize, right? Because when I was graduating from college, I wanted to go Marine Corps and then I wanted to, commission. That's what I really wanted to do. But, I'd seen years of therapy and all this stuff, right? And same kind of thing where it was like, hey, I'm going to be honest, integrity. Obviously, that's something that everybody wants and stands for. You give it to them, and then it's like, well, so I ended up, not making it. But it's just interesting that I learned that same lesson where it's like, integrity is great, valued, but society, norms, morals, stuff like that, right? It comes into play. So that's interesting. How did you navigate that? The lie, more or less. I mean, like, were you cool with it, or was that sort of difficult for you?
Um, I think I made peace with the fact that basically the information was irrelevant to what I was doing. You know what I mean? Like, this is not need to know information for what I'm trying to do. That is old news.
Yeah.
That is basically the old version of me. I was a fucking teenager. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
thank God there was no internet or cell phones when I grew up. I'm just saying.
Yeah.
So
Right.
the fact that I was self-disclosing on something, let's just consider that a privilege.
Right.
I don't. It probably set the path for a lot more disappointments on the lack of integrity in the real adult world that I didn't realize existed. I think that was the first bubble that was burst, honestly.
Okay, that's fair. That's fair. Yeah, I think that's a good thing to know, right? Is the world is not necessarily as it seems.
And it doesn't mean you have to lie to keep up with it. I think you have to find your path of ethics and what you're comfortable with. If that makes sense.
It
Like,
does. It does.
Now that I work in mental health, like the stories I hear from people, like that shit's to the grave shit. So
yeah. Oh yeah.
Like,
oh
your
yeah.
integrity is everything. So you just have to know what you stand for and stick with that.
That's true. Yeah, sticking to your defined morals. Anyways, yeah, that could be super philosophical. We could totally rabbit hole it. But okay, so maybe to not rabbit hole, why policing? You wanted to serve in uniform, serve in military police. Why that route?
More specific. So I was raised in Germany my whole life, and my family is half American, meaning they're half American veterans and they're half German veterans. So
oh, nice. Okay.
They fought on both sides of World War II.
Yep.
And so very different appreciation of service / talked about it.
Okay.
And then in Florida, I saw a female police officer protecting a synagogue the day that 9/11 happened on my way home from work.
Okay.
And so I think that showed me the world impact that, like, something that happened in New York is affecting us standing guard in front of religious houses, specifically symbolically a synagogue. For Germans, that was like, whoa, we're at that level. So I think it really drove home the point on how serious this event was and where that really changed things for everybody in the world.
Yeah.
And I just thought her role, so small, was still something of purpose. Like, she looked like she was really doing that job with pride and significance, and like her standing there fucking mattered that day.
Right.
So I really wanted to be that person.
Okay.
So I think that's really what drove it. And then my father served in Vietnam, so let's just say he never spoke of it. And then my grandfather on the American side was in the Marine Corps and was in the Pacific. So he definitely came home with some subscriptions to issues, is what we're going to call it.
Yeah. Yep.
And on the German side, I had one uncle that was in the U-boat Navy. One uncle didn't make it home from Stalingrad. And then my grandfather spent most of his time in jail because he refused to support the Nazis. So, but a very different relationship to, America as the liberator. So, that's how my German family felt about the Americans. However, my American family had very strong other feelings about my German family.
Yeah, that's interesting. So you come from a pretty healthy family of resilient, and stubborn and proud people, it sounds like.
Yeah, sugarcoating things probably.
No, that's awesome. And then the Navy was from, did you say your dad then?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So big Navy pride then. Go Navy, beat Army?
Um, Honestly, I feel like my dad doesn't talk about his service in the Navy very much at all. He rarely shows photos. He rarely discusses any details. He shows more pride in my grandfather's service
Okay.
than his own. So I'm sure there's some generational issues there that we still need to unpack. Now that I work with so many more veterans, I definitely see some red flags that need to be addressed. But um, it was paying homage to him, but it wasn't influenced by him. Like, I don't see him show any favoritism or pride in the Navy whatsoever, honestly.
Yeah. Okay. So then when you started in the Navy and you made it through, I don't know, is it called like Military Police Academy? I mean, is it kind of the same verbiage?
They call it Master at Arms School, which
Okay.
always felt like such an oxymoron because we are nothing if not Master at Arms at all. And it's in San Antonio. So for all of the Navy, all of our law enforcement training for the basic stuff is down in San Antonio on an Air Force base.
Oh, okay. Well, that's funny. A little also ironic.
It's very bougie. I promise you, coming straight from boot camp to A school in San Antonio where we had housekeeping and a salad bar. Like, it was nice.
That's awesome. So did it meet expectations as you started working through, every post that you had? Did you kind of get that sense of fulfillment?
God, no.
No.
No. Oh, I mean, contextually, I will say I went into law enforcement in 2002, March 2002. Like, we were just ramping up and just dumping all these baby sailors out of boot camp into the police academy. It's like super troopers on steroids. So you have a whole bunch of immature 18-year-olds and you're putting them loose on the streets, you know what I mean? And not just law enforcement. Now we're talking like anti-terrorism force protection capabilities, which the academy wasn't teaching at the time. So they had not changed the curriculum when we went through. So we were still very much a domestic violence response, traffic stops, like street cop stuff.
Sure.
Which now has thankfully changed a lot more, and the capabilities are much more geared toward what military and uniformed personnel should be doing on a much larger scale, instead of being a rent-a-cop, especially when we have Department of Defense contractors doing it on most bases. So we were extremely ill-prepared. And honestly, I mean, the military overall was completely overwhelmed in 2000 with between wanting to start an invasion, not quite starting it then, and then actually starting it and ramping things up from recruiting to pushing people through boot camp to getting them in their jobs when they're clueless little babies.
Yeah.
So it's pretty scary that we all made it through the way we did. Country made it through with all of us basically standing guard. Like, kudos. There were some days like I was questionable.
Yeah. What I guess so obviously you made it and maybe underprepared, but I imagine there was probably a few things that either you picked up or had going into it that helped you along the way. What were maybe some of the skills that you're like, this actually saved my ass a time or two?
I mean, thankfully, we were paired with senior guys and especially reservists. Like, we had some crotchety old fuckers, and I mean that with all love and endearment, that had such a tremendous amount resentment. Of knowledge of life. Some of these guys were in Vietnam, you know what I mean? Like, that's who you want mentoring you when you're going on the street.
Yeah, right.
So the privilege of learning from experienced people and senior people that were really there and graciously sharing their knowledge and making sure us baby cops were, on the road, not being a hazard to society. And I mean, honestly, I grew up in Germany, so I had a much different life experience. And I think that while in some ways definitely gave me some cultural shocks here, prepared me in a lot of other ways. Like, I was 16 years old when Kosovo was going off at its finest, and people in our high school were getting drafted by their home country. So people are just leaving school from one semester to the next to never return. Families were torn apart. They were originally Yugoslavian, and then all of a sudden cousins aren't speaking anymore. Divorces start happening because one is Kosovo Albanian and one is Croatian. So it was, the 90s in Germany were real gangster. It was just a different world. Like, it was post-Cold War. We're the center country that everything traffics through from east to west. So being a teenager in the 90s in Frankfurt, Germany was really exciting and taught me a lot of life skills. That made me definitely more mature. When I finally got in the military, I was not like a fresh kid out of high school with no clue of life.
Yeah. So I'm trying to think of a good way to ask this without it being just lame. But like being in Germany during the gangster era of the 90s and then coming to the United States where I imagine, I was young in the 90s, what I can only imagine as some pretty immature, inexperienced, uncultured people, right? Like, I guess relative to your peers, what set you apart as far as skills, knowledge, way of thinking?
I mean, I became the team mom to a lot of my peers just from the maturity aspect, and I, honestly just pulling the girl card there. So, I don't know if it gave me an advantage because I had such a culture shock. Like there are certain things where I definitely actually struggled a lot more in the military.
Okay.
Like the entire concept of, yeah, Germany's just so anti-military, you know what I mean? Like it is such opposites. I had to skip school in high school in Germany to visit my friend when he graduated from German boot camp
Really?
in the Bundeswehr, because it was so not supported. Like, God forbid you ever went to support a graduation. Like, you don't talk about that shit.
Huh.
So it's just a different era that even people are prideful that you serve. Was a whole new experience, like that people are enthusiastic that you're in the military and that you're, serving your country. That's not something that in my world was ever discussed before. You know what I mean? Like, you didn't talk about if you were serving. If you were a reservist or if you got drafted, you didn't share that if you didn't have to.
Interesting. So, and I know that we kind of talked about it a little bit, but having come from that life experience to having the sense of feeling like you want to serve in uniform, how did you manage or kind of navigate that dichotomy? I guess I feel like those are two significant swings of perspective, right?
I mean, I had to like consciously surrender for my security clearance. I had to like give up my German citizenship and like, the whole passport thing. So it was a little bit killing off one identity, if that makes sense. Like, you're really like saying fuck you to one of your home countries in a way. But the significance of 9/11 and like the trajectory I was on just felt so right. Like, there was no hesitation. Like, you could feel the emotion, but there was no hesitation in the choice of it. Yeah, I think that's
it. Yeah. And I asked just because it's interesting, right? I mean, so I don't know, I find things like that very interesting where people experience life different, obviously, which is why I've started the podcast, right? Is you learn so much from people's different experiences. So okay, well, I won't hyperfixate on that. So throughout, I guess, your time in the Navy, I don't really know kind of Navy process or anything. I don't have any military experience, but one thing that I'm always interested in is what would be something that you would wish maybe that you would have known before going into the Navy, or would like to go back and tell younger you, or somebody that wants to go and be an MP2?
Oh shit, man, that's like a deep
it's
question.
Loaded. It's one of my favorite.
Oh man, so
I'll ask
loaded.
another one later too, but it's one of my favorite loaded questions.
I mean, I think that integrity thing is a good one to stick with your, I don't want to call it a brand, but who you are and what you stand for, the choices you make, like that's with you for a lifetime. So whatever choices you make, like be at peace with it, but choose your integrity, if that makes sense. So I'll share an example. My first duty station, one of the girls I was stationed with, so we're all MPs, and her mother comes to visit and starts smoking pot in the barracks in front of all of us. And one of the supervisors confronts several of us on the smoke deck about it. Like, is there pot smoking going, like this was reported to us. And you bet your fucking ass, if actually directly confronted and I have to actually answer the question, I ain't lying for you. I absolutely said yes. That's what's happening. And it cost me several friends at my first command. I mean, the story is much more nuanced and there's way more to it. But in the end, like, it was a choice I had to make. Is I'm gonna shut the fuck up and protect my friends, or I stick with I'm directly asked. And if it comes out later, like, that's my brand, that's my integrity forever gone with the leadership that I lied. So I chose to tell the truth. And I mean, same thing with when I was asked if I smoked pot and I didn't get the job. So a certain on point integrity in life really matters to me. And I think that's transcended all of that.
Okay. That's great advice. I do like the
no
brand.
matter what bad things happen, there is, you got to live with your choices, and you got to make those choices with integrity.
Yeah. I feel like it's kind of funny. So the integrity piece, like the use of the word integrity is interesting now, right? Like, I feel like it's a very charged word. Whereas I think if you use the word brand in relation, I think for this generation, it probably sounds, or like it sings a little bit better, like it's like, oh, my brand. Oh, yeah, that's right. Like it's kind of goofy. So, okay. So by this time then, I mean, are you transitioning out, retiring? So I think you said what, 2002 to 2008?
2007.
2007. Okay. So what was the catalyst for, hey, it's time to move on. I'm going to go experience normal, less than exciting life?
So I was med boarded, meaning I was finally found to have too many injuries that allowed me to continue serving on active duty. So I was basically kicked out of the military. And it was hard. It was a difficult choice because my chief medical officer actually, like, just straight up asked me, he's like, I don't think you're going to make it. Meaning I was absolutely suicidal at that point, like,
okay,
ready to eat a gun or like somebody just take me out of my misery. So in that whole risky living behavior phase too. So the chief basically said, I don't think you're going to make it if you don't, like, get out of this environment and this job. And so he basically signed me out on medical papers saying she needs to medically get out of the military. So I was admin sept under medical conditions in 2007. And it was heart-wrenching identity crisis because I really thought I was going to do 20, and I thought they took law enforcement from me, like it was just, and I got a letter basically saying you have 30 days to get out. So it was like all happening very fast. So that super, super sucked. There's no really other way to put it. So you have like this scramble crisis of your entire social networks being ripped away from you, meaning medical, housing, like all of the social coverage you have as a military member is going to be gone in 30 days. And I left with no benefits. So it's not like I was like retired with anything. They basically just said, no, you're just done.
Okay.
So I had to turn around and like go file with the VA and plead my case and file for education benefits. And so I started trying to go back to school and fuck my way around there, and ended up in cosmetology school because my voc rehab counselor recommended it somehow. And I really can't say how I went with the flow there. Like, here we are. It happened.
Yeah.
But maybe I needed that type of completely opposite environment to just kind of lick my wounds for a while. Meaning, the salon environment is very opposite of camis and gun belts all day, every day.
Sure.
So it wasn't bad. It was definitely odd. But it almost allowed me to pause and just figure things out for a while learning a trade. And honestly, it is a trade. So I ain't hating it. I just don't have the personality to actually work in a salon. It turns out, like, zero.
That's a special type of personality.
Yes. And I just don't have it at all.
Yeah.
I just wasn't happy there.
Okay. So I'm going to go back a little bit, if that's cool with you. So in kind of the 30-day period leading up to it, right? You're having a pretty hard time, suicidal thoughts, everybody's worried about you. What, and only as personal as you want it to get, what did that look like, and how were you able to kind of take this whole kind of clusterfuck of a situation and take advantage of it? And I'm asking, in the same vein, right, that if somebody else is like, hey, I'm ready to eat a gun too, and they're listening to you right now, right? What what did you do to help yourself or find people to help you not eat the gun?
So first of all, the wet blanket of fuck will go away again. So don't eat that gun. There is a bow on every pig, I promise you, for starters. And for me, so it wasn't that I wasn't suicidal the last 30 days. Like, honestly, aside from panicking about getting basically thrown out of the military, I was hugely relieved. So I was at a really bad command, and it was actually my third toxic command in a row. So I basically just had over 5 years of shitty experiences in the military, is what we're going to collectively call that. So I was basically just at my last rope mentally and maintaining in that kind of environment. And it was to the point where other commands were trying to intervene because they saw how my leadership was treating me. So they were even going against doctors' orders. So it was a really obvious, really public dick measuring contest, is what I'm going to call it. And so culminating in the chief medical officer saying, I don't think you can sustain this kind of environment. Like, that's why he had me basically medically sent out of the military, so he could get me out of that environment, because I really just was at my wit's end. And that was from not being allowed to receive mental health treatment, not getting any of the support. So it was, the opposite of what you would envision supportive leadership being. And that's ultimately what did it. And for me, the hardest thing is because the chief asked me, it almost felt like I was giving up. So for years, I really struggled with the fact that I gave up on the military.
Okay.
Like, I felt like I tapped out. So that took a long time to recover from. So honestly, getting out of a toxic environment is really important, especially if you are at suicidal ideation. It's definitely not helpful to stay in an environment that makes that wet blanket of fuck continue. Finding purpose and being around people that you can rely on, even if you're not sharing the entire narrative or wanting to open up, if that makes sense. Like, I had some really amazing people in K9 that were just incredible human beings. And I mean, just little gestures like helping me move out of my apartment after I got out, like little things like that, like people just showing up. Like, stick around people that show up for you. But yeah, suicide's one of those fucking shitty conversations that, having had those thoughts and feelings, it's really hard to articulate them, but you definitely can share that sentiment with other people who are feeling that.
Yeah. Yeah. I've never been down that route. Like, my OCD takes plenty of other forms that get more frustrating, but it's never taken me down that rabbit hole. But one other question that I have is, when you hit those thoughts, or when you started to process out, right? I imagine that's equivalent to some sort of rock bottom, right? How did you, I guess, mentally get yourself to the point of accepting that you need to move on, and then also, I guess, pushing yourself past the point of saying, hey, this is toxic and I do need to change? So maybe two questions there.
Can you repeat the second one, just because the internet broke up?
Yeah. So maybe my first question is, you are having these suicidal thoughts. You're in a very toxic environment. How did you build yourself up enough to move on? Because that is a very difficult decision to make, particularly when everything around you is bad.
I'm not really good at like losing, if that makes sense. So it's one of those, I'm not gonna let them win just out of fucking spite. I'm the kind of person who endure all kinds of things just to not be the loser on something. And really, in the end, because it was specific people that were being toxic, it became that mentality of, I'm not gonna let you win.
Yeah.
Like, fuck you. Like, I'm going to stay alive and fucking make something of myself just to fucking spite you. So, I mean, it's petty, but it kept me alive. So, whatever floats your boat and gets you going, honestly.
It's not stupid if it works, right? Yeah. Okay. So then as you started to kind of rebuild and lick your wounds, like you said, what kept you going? I mean, did you have a plan other than going with the flow to cosmetology school, or was it kind of just like whatever happens, happens?
I'll be honest, I almost moved back to Germany.
Really?
Yeah, so I went to, as soon as I got out, I went to Germany for almost 3 months to visit my friend that I hadn't seen in a while. And I needed to be completely away from the American culture. It was very holistic for me to not be around the rah, rah, rah. Because I got out in '07, which was like really bad times for our military, and they deserved all the support. I just didn't want to hear about it at the time.
Yeah.
So it was very cathartic to just be away, completely insulated from anything that had to do with that in a completely different world. And I almost wanted to stay there, but that's almost like chasing a high. So, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it wasn't realistic to just run away to another country and be like, that's going to make it all go away. Because in the end, like what's fucked up in your soul and the wounds you're carrying with you, they're traveling with you anyway. So
If only, right?
yeah. So, I mean, I knew I had to do something education wise or find a way to make an income. You know what I mean? Like in the end, it was just chasing some kind of, the basic needs that need to be met on the pyramid. Like, how are you going to feed yourself? How are you going to house yourself? Which turned out.
Oh, the internet cut and it got back now.
Yeah, we have a bad storm going here.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can totally hear
Okay.
you.
Okay. So it cut off, pyramid is where we left.
Yeah, so basically just trying to meet your basic needs of putting a roof over your head, food on the table, like, your economic needs. And I originally thought that cosmetology would be that. Like, I thought it was a trade, so you can do it anywhere. And I was dating a military guy at the time, so I assumed that whole military spouse life, you need a more mobile job. So that seemed like a good short-term plan. And I honestly didn't have a long-term vision at the time on what I thought my life was going to look like. I'm not sure I was able to see that far ahead at that time.
Right. Right. So then what, I guess I'm looking at my notes and my handwriting is absolutely atrocious because you went to cosmetology school after that, or you went to cosmetology school. That's a hard word to say. What did you do after that then? Because it's a short-term plan, you said. Sorry, I got thrown with the storm and everything. What happens next?
Yes. So went to cosmetology school, and right when I graduated, one of my friends in Germany tragically passed away. So in between jobs, I went back to Germany for a funeral. And right then my fiance / future husband got orders to be forward deployed to Diego Garcia, which is in the Indian Ocean. So he was going to be gone for 2 years on a boat that's anchored outside of an island in the Indian Ocean, which is not a bad gig for him, except for there's nothing out there. But for me, I was in Seattle, Washington as a hairdresser, and I just lost a very close friend. So I'm like, I'm not staying on this coast. I don't know anybody over here. So I moved closer to family in Syracuse. And that's where I ended up talking to a voc rehab counselor who handles vocational rehabilitation, which is something covered by the VA for people who have certain levels of disability, okay, to cover their like retraining to a different job. And I was an unemployed hairdresser and military spouse needing help. And I ended up at Syracuse University. And I promise you, I ended up at like the night classes. I had to prove my way in because my GPA showing up was not something they were willing to.
They're like, you can pick the trash up.
Yeah, so I really had to start at like university college and take night classes and prove that I was capable of actually finishing a college course. And really fell in love with going to school. Like, yeah. Holy shit, did I fall in love with that shit. Like, I'm a secret nerd. Didn't know it until I got there. But so fell in love with going to college, spending all the GI Bill money I could. Like, I treated that shit like, March Madness brackets. Like, I was aligning classes that would count toward as many degrees as possible. Like, I'm going to get everything out of this. I'm not kidding you. Like, I fucking loved it. So I got an undergraduate in military history and German language, literature, and linguistics. And as weird as that sounds, then it surprisingly actually has come in really strong in what I currently do with veterans.
Okay.
And I never would have seen that coming.
So how does it play in then? Because like I
Most of
can.
the literature is post-war literature in German, meaning these are all people that survived trauma, survived the war, either as a combatant or non-combatant. So post-trauma recovery, post-conflict reconstruction and resolution is all what I focused all my degrees on. And so reading in history books, honestly, how previous generations have overcome, but also how they have articulated what they have been through has been tremendously helpful in basically working with people where I don't have their experience, but I've read enough about it to be of empathy, if that makes sense.
It does. Did you plan on that, or was it just like by pure happenstance?
Pure happenstance. And only in the last recent years have I really realized how much I'm drawing on, like, oh my God, I'm reading about like Sledge and like some, just some of the famous literature from World War II. And I mean, having met some of these legends now has just taught me so much to working with current conflict veterans and the post-conflict recovery, like unfucking the shit that you've been through.
So how did that come to be then? How did you go from just studying it to saying, okay, great, I genuinely want to work and help and be in the mental health arena and applying it?
In college, one of my canine friends who was instrumental in me getting out of the military alive and safely, he passed away in a car accident. And I reunited with a lot of my unit from my last command at that funeral. And it was like, bring you to your knees, crying, cathartic, like really good. It was a great reunion. These were all people that were really close to each other. And that really like gave me a turn in where I was going in life and how much I missed those people. Like until then, I'd really turned my back on the veterans and military community. Like I couldn't give two shits about that.
Yeah.
I was there to spend my GI Bill and like whatevs. But I'd missed them so much, and it was so cathartic to see them at that funeral. And like that's really what even got me through the funeral, especially when I played taps. Like the boys were holding me up. It was awful. So that really turned it for me. And somehow I knew I had to get back into the veterans community. So I ended up going to the Veterans Club where I met that other girl that was getting a service dog. And because Steve had been a canine handler, I'm like, oh my God, canine. And I just lost Steve. Like I need to follow this. So it was a little bit from a broken heart and grief that I pursued that. And I threw a full scholarship to another master's program to the wayside to do public administration and policy, which sounds really, really boring and is really hard to explain what it actually does. But it has something to do with making laws and shit in DC, and it was so interesting, and I loved every second of it.
Okay. So then I think we've probably glazed over then how and where and why did the canines come in?
Honestly, Steve dying did something for me. It was my senior year of undergrad. And as soon as that happened, I reconnected with veterans and I somehow was recommended this program. And one of the professors in the program was a retired admiral. And somehow everything I wrote was on canine policy, working dogs, special operations. So I wrote a budget proposal for Dev Group for a kennel to increase funding for, their force multipliers on the law enforcement side. And then I did some policy proposals regarding service dog policy because there isn't really anything in governance when it comes to service dogs. And just honestly, through my publications in grad school and the interviews I was doing in grad school is how I landed a job in the service dog world. So I kind of just wrote papers on something I loved. And it kind of led me to the industry that ended up just hiring me before I even graduated. And I kind of never left.
Huh. That's interesting. So then did you not know that that's kind of the world in which you wanted to live? Again, just happenstance walked into it?
as soon as I discovered that that world existed, I knew I wanted to be in it. I did not know in what capacity. So I wasn't like in school all of a sudden saying, oh my God, I want to found my organization. Like that is literally an accident, or a one up, like saying, I think we can do it better. But other than that, like I knew I wanted to be in this field with veterans and dogs. I didn't know in what capacity. But honestly, as it's shaped out with the different roles I've held,
Mm-hmm.
Working from building programs out to actually being the person that handles the applications for people who want a service dog, meaning I've read those stories when people are writing their narrative. So I've seen a lot of the different avenues of it, and it's bittersweet. It's a very tragic industry. We're always working against the clock. I mean, they always flaunt different suicide numbers in front of you, and a lot of those are very real, and we've lost people we were working with, or so it's always at our forefront. So it's a love-hate relationship, and I'm sure it's not meant to be forever, because I don't think anybody can sustain this emotional involvement forever.
Sure.
But I wouldn't change it for the world. I love it.
Yeah. So on the topic of the role that you play now and Leashes of Valor, do you mind talking about what it looks like and what you guys are doing?
Not at all. So I'm one of 3 co-founders, and we all worked at other organizations together. So we've actually worked together for 9 years. 9 years now. So, I mean, my CEO is basically my work husband, is what we call him at this point. And so we provide service dogs at no cost, meaning we take dogs from shelters or from breeders donated, and we have them for almost 2 years in order to custom train them to the person's specific disabilities. If that is nightmare interruption, medication retrieval, there's certain self-soothing behaviors. When people have certain anxiety, sometimes you start doing things like leg tapping or playing with like your wedding band. They're almost like when a child is sucking their thumb. I'm not making fun of it, but it's a way for your body to soothe itself before the anxiety gets too high.
Sure.
So we teach the dog to interrupt that specific behavior, which allows the person to almost take what I call a fake smoke break. Meaning you go out to give the dog a break without anybody making it, oh my God, are you okay? Are you having a PTSD episode? It's a really great cover story to just go out with a dog and recalibrate before things get too much. So it allows you just to experience a lot more of life when the dog is alerting on certain things and interrupting them. And then on the side, we now created LOV Blue, where we're starting to put therapy dogs in police departments, specifically more internally than externally. So while I do love the outward facing aspect that a therapy dog does for a community, and it's a huge bridge the gap tool for law enforcement officers, I'm more worried about what it's doing internally with mental health in the law enforcement community and first responders, because the suicide rate there is higher than it is with veterans at this point. So that's kind of like my baby on the side, is our LOV Blue program. But ultimately, we're just working on creating the human-animal bond and making sure people have access to the right resources to get to the next step.
Yeah. So what's the process look like for applying and then creating kind of that human animal bond?
So the process is a lot of times chicken and egg, meaning you need to fill out an actual application that's kind of like Match.com, because I am really looking for, like, what's your life like? If you are active and like in the woods, the dog needs to be able to go with you. If you are watching Judge Judy and picking your belly button every day, then the dog needs to be chill on the couch, right? So the dog needs to be custom trained and selected for your life. If you have small children, if you have cats, if you live on a farm or in the city. And then also the nuances of what's specifically going on with you, meaning, do you have dexterity issues? Sometimes people have physical impairments. The dog can't walk on a certain side, for example. You have fine motor skill issues. You can't put a lead on the collar, for example. So there's little nuances we need to know, and then big nuances. And then we either already have a dog that would work for that applicant, and then I custom train it to those specific nuances. If I don't have a dog already in the program, because I currently have 26 dogs actively training right now, and I'm about to go up to 32. So if none of those are viable for that person who is a viable applicant, then I will start looking for a dog to train for that person. So it's a match.com trying to have the right person for the right dog and vice versa, and then matching all that up. So once we have all of that selected, meaning the person's done their application, they've given me their diagnosis and their DD214, and I have the right dog, then we schedule you for what we call a residential program, meaning you are brought out to Virginia for 10 days. And that's to do the whole train as you fight. Meaning I can't just hand you a leash and be like, go on your merry way. Like, we're taking 10 days to actually teach you life with a new appendage. A dog is next to you. You can't just hand somebody a wheelchair and be like, go on your merry way. So same thing here. You need to learn commands. You need to conduct yourself publicly with an animal. It's a huge responsibility. And also, how is it going to help you? And then it's little things like practicing all those things not in front of your family, so you don't feel like a failure or everybody's watching you when you go home. So we're going to put you in that 10-day baby boot camp where we're going to turn you into a mini dog handler in an environment where you can fail as much as you want. Ain't nobody judging you. But then when you go home, you at least look like a professional in front of your family.
Yeah, showtime.
And you know what you're doing, because there's a lot of eyes on you. And that's a very uncomfortable thing when you have PTSD, is to be the center of attention like that.
Yeah. Okay. So then how long does it take for, let's say, an individual application is already submitted? How long from the time it gets submitted to baby boot camp?
It can be as fast as 3 to 6 months. And sometimes it can, if people are not out of the military yet, we won't actually entertain it until they have their command support, because the military is not down with service dogs. So it also depends a little bit on their availability. And currently we're only doing 2 group classes a year, and we're about to ramp to 3 a year. So it kind of has to work with their schedule.
Okay.
And if it doesn't, then we honestly make accommodations for anybody. Like, we've had agency guys that really could only get 4 days off at a time. So we spaced it out over several weeks in 4-day increments to make it happen.
Okay.
So we're still small like that, where we can make sure nobody falls through the cracks. And that's really what we aim to do.
Okay. So then are you obviously targeting for law enforcement, military, and then you're training dogs really to handle just about any type of trauma, anxiety, or are you specializing just in like, I guess, PTSD? You said the nightmare interruption. I mean, is there different classifications that you're targeting? And I ask because I genuinely don't know how it works.
We try not to target specific classifications because most medical professionals are not very good at even classifying things properly. So I currently don't necessarily rely on their input that much. Meaning you have to have a diagnosis of PTSD or an affiliated condition, because a lot of people have been kicked out of the military for, they called it depressive disorder at one point, which for a lot of people is still PTSD. So it's honestly looking at the collective package, but ideally you have to have a diagnosis of post-traumatic stress disorder, traumatic brain injury, or military sexual trauma. You have to have served after 9/11. And ideally you have to have an honorable discharge. However, we will take into consideration appeals of bad paper discharges, because sometimes people are kicked out for the wrong reasons. So it's not a finality.
Okay. Then you guys are nonprofit, correct?
Yes, we are completely funded by donations, and we don't take government grants, and we're heavily involved in research, actually.
Nice. Okay. So if people want to help, get involved, where do they go? How do they get a hold of you?
We're on all the socials. leashesofvalor.org is our website. That's where we can take donations. We have some pretty dope merch, and you can read a lot of our warrior stories if you want to know more about these dogs and where they end up going, and what some of these people have been through in wanting to receive a dog. It's just really interesting to see the different walks of life. And on the socials, you can hit us up and follow all the awesome stories we do. And ideally share the message so that people also know that we exist as a resource and that service dogs are something that can be of help for many.
Danique, once again, thank you for taking the time to share your story with me and what you're working on with Leashes of Valor. I will be sure to link Leashes of Valor's website and Instagram in the episode description as well. So if all of you or any of you feel the need to get connected in some way, shape, or form, or want to help out, or feel like you need a service dog, that way you can reach out and get connected with them. But otherwise, I hope you all have a wonderful week, and we will catch you next time.